Hello and welcome to podcast number 6. I wanted to talk about certain things in podcast number 5 and just a few things, my memories, and I just didn't want to forget certain things I wanted to tell about Aelita. But the really important one to achieving something despite you're a child, not because you're a child. And in my personal experience for the last 12 years, I think Aelita achieved something despite she's a child, not because she's a child. And like the being such a difficult journey.
You wanted to make some particular point.
Yes, this is a point I wanted to make. I wanted to make the point. This is because, like, some comments are, because she's a child, it's so easy, you're going to get all this attention, you're going to do this and this and that. Yes, but I just want to say that the really, really important part and aspect of it, like the most difficult, I found, like in all this journey, I found, and I realized that we've got so much ageism. We call it this way. I'm not sure if you've got a word like this in English, ageism.
Prejudice.
Yes.
Prejudice against children.
Prejudice, yes, against children. Because, like, a child has to have its own place. The most important, child is under control of adult. It's very, very important because, for example, if...
I don't even think it's deliberate. I think it's just ingrained in society, in our attitudes. It's just part of our makeup.
As long as a child is under our control, as long as child knows their place until they're 18 years of age. If you look at a child has technically no rights until they're 18 years of age, no legal rights. This is why a lot of exhibitions, like the curators has to break the rules to be able to exhibit Aelita because she's under 18 years of age.
Let's specifically talk about that, because in the commercial gallery in the heart of New York that Aelita exhibited in, there was a very clear restriction for artists to exhibit their work. You had to be a minimum of 18 years old. Now, why? Why is that? Why should there be a minimum age? It's like saying you must be a certain race or religion.
Well, it's
in order to exhibit somewhere.
Well, look what's happening right now.
Why base it on age?
This is why I was talking about our society. According to, for example, all our understanding in the society, after 70 years of age, you pretty much you have to go on a pension. That's it. Give the opportunity to young people. You have to go on pension.
Wait a minute.
Look at Kusama. Look at Kusama.
Yeah.
All her most incredible work, most solid work.
Oh, yeah.
She's
right.
91.
No, that's what. That's the point you're making. Yeah.
I'm painting it. Like, for example, it's ageism. If you look at it, it's ageism.
Right.
It's ageism.
Right.
You've got ageism towards the children.
It's standard in our society.
Ageism towards the old adult.
Yeah.
What is all about us? What is all about? What it actually states about our society?
Yeah.
That we can't tolerate the older people,
the elderly,
and we can't
being
tolerate
productive and creative.
Yes, we
and
can't
very
tolerate
young children.
Very young children, because they're all threat.
Contributing to society. Why threat?
Because Aelita is
like
because it's really interesting, because I always felt like because you're talking to some kids, like the sort of like some of it you can tell, like I said, that I didn't continue conversation and last because all Aelita's using the colors. This is really important for her, why she uses the colors. She's not just slaps any colors, or like she just using like any paint to have fun. She's actually symbolically represents every painting, and she talks about it at length. And it's really interesting because she talks about it at length in her exhibition when she's 4 years of age, when she's 2 years of age, 3 years of age. She actually talks about her paintings. It's like, for her, it's a very, very important process. She talks about it. But anyway, and if you look at it, like she always was like represented like a threat to the art society.
Why?
But this is what I
Why
can't
is it a
understand.
threat?
Because probably
Threatening
because her art is so powerful, And then because of sound paintings, because now like she's actually progresses and then she's forwarding to something else, like it's constantly like they're looking at her from a point of view of a threat.
But why are kids supported by their peers in other industries? Like, for example, if you have a prodigious child who is a musician, the other musicians will support that child. So why is there antagonism and the opposite attitude here? Why? I have a feeling I know the answer, but what do you think? So specifically related to, and I would say this is very specific, to children creating abstract art. It's very specific. In other words, not figurative. If Aelita was a figurative painter, I have a theory. I believe that she would be supported by certain peers around her who would also be figurative artists.
It's really interesting
but abstract.
because
Why?
I was also like the interesting wait a minute, curator. Like it's really interesting. Curator was actually wanted to show Aelita's all creative input in Russian museum.
Oh yeah,
What they actually did, because they requested Aelita was exhibiting her digital art, iPad art. She was exhibiting photography, and she was exhibiting her drawings. Like it's of course
they're figurative drawings though.
Figurative drawings, because you see why this was picked because like if you remember the first drawing of Picasso when he did his first
I think a bullfighter
drawing,
when he was 8 years old. He did
9 years old. 9 years old. He was 9 years old,
and he did a realistic. It was like a realistic painting of a bullfighter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also like Aelita's painting of a horse, like it's extraordinary drawing. I was actually shocked when I saw it first time. And it's usually what Aelita would do, like with the left hand, she'd do one line and outline of a animal. It's usually animals, because she thought the humans are not worthy of her painting them or drawing them, because they damage the world so much that if they would have disappeared off the earth wouldn't even blink and would probably breathe easier. This was her opinion about humans. She always would paint animals, and it just one outline of a horse head, and it just the director insisted for Aelita to exhibit it because it was extraordinary.
The director of the museum,
yes,
demanded to
exhibit it because at the age of 8. And we'll post the comparison. It would be just quite interesting. And I'm thinking too, like if person is visually gifted, like with abstraction, they would be visually gifted to do something like Aelita refers to it, like copying Nietzsche, because she says like, okay, because she did a sculpture and she wasn't happy with it, because she said, Nietzsche does so much better work than I can ever imagine to do ever. She breathes its life into it.
I thought you were going to talk about ageism.
Oh yeah, oh gosh, okay.
Because I'm waiting for you to get back onto track to talk about ageism. Are you going to talk about that, or just look? This is all great, and you can continue this at another time. And I get what you're saying, but are you going to talk about ageism?
I'm talking about
because
ageism.
That's the whole, right.
It's not just because of children; it's because of adults as well. You can imagine, like, for example...
What do you mean?
Like, it's ageism towards adults as well, like the pensioners.
Yeah, the elderly. Yeah, the elderly and kids. Why? Why?
Well, you tell me. I still can't
I've
guess
got
it.
my theory.
I don't
Why?
understand. I don't know.
But hang on.
Because another point too, like we know, like the
Kusama doesn't have
extraordinary
ageism.
person who
She's
is a
accepted.
psychologist.
She's in the top 10.
Psychology, but look,
so that's
how
not ageism.
long it took her to get where she got, and also
but
that
couldn't
she
you
was
argue the opposite? Now that she's 90, she's successful.
1 second, she was reinvented by watch documentaries about her by one man who remembered her from being in New York in 60s or something like this. Watch the documentary. She was reinvented like this.
No, I understand, but we're talking about ageism.
Her incredible gift would have been just
You're saying
buried.
the elderly have ageism against them, but there's an example that contradicts whatever you're saying, doesn't it?
I know, but like she is
She's only
91.
famous now.
She's look, took her how many years? She's 91 now. She does it from 13
No,
years
I
of
know. We're
age.
talking about ageism.
Well, how many years it is? It's like sort of 80 years took her to get where she is right now.
Okay, the elderly, I'm not so sure, but kids, what I'm interested in is, as I said to you,
No, but
in
it's
the
really
contract,
interesting.
it said you must be a minimum of 18. Now, why? Why? It's like saying, oh, you must
Or
be.
if you're under 18, it's right away they actually taking it on the parents, said, oh, parents want to make
No,
money.
wait a minute.
Another point to
No,
like,
no, no.
I
I'm
just wanna,
saying legally, contractually, you simply have no right to exhibit your paintings or your artwork or whatever it is in the gallery. Like, as soon as you're under 18, it's not even permissible. You're not even under consideration.
well, because it's you're too
Why?
young, you know.
No, no, no. What
Because
does that
it's really
mean?
interesting.
What does
It's
that
really
mean? Too
interesting. We were
young?
talking
What does
like
that mean?
I just want to give
Why?
another
I want to know
example.
why.
We were going around with Aelita in the art basel, and it just like we just Aelita was interested. We were chatting to a few, and talking about young artists. One of the directors of the galleries. And he says, "Oh wow, I've got one really really young artist. She's just only starting. She's really really young, by standards in the art world." And he said she's 30, and he just says, "Oh wow, she's 13." He says, "No no 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 no, she's not 13. She's 30.
Yeah, no, no, no.
She's
He was, hang
30.
on, he was Belgian or something, or Austrian or whatever. I can't remember. And so he had a bit of an accent. He had a bit of an accent
German?
yeah, 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 yeah. It was basically like a Germanic language. Okay, but he had an accent, and so when he said 30, it was because his accent was very hard, because it was.
Aelita thought it was 13.
Aelita thought that he said 13. Yeah, and she said, "Oh, well, like I'm whatever she was, 12 or something. So yeah, she's a kid like me.
11 or
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, whatever. But you're a kid like me. Yeah. And then the guy said, "No, 30. She's 30. That's young." When we think of young, like when you and I think of young, when you and I think of a young artist, we're thinking 10, 9, 12. We're thinking like that. That's young for us. So we've sort of pushing the age thing all the way back now. That's young, whereas to a gallerist or a curator or anybody in the art world or whatever, young would be late 20s or something.
Yeah, but it is really interesting. But our perception of a young person, because if you look at it, like the early days, people were dying early, like at the age of 30, 35, 40, 50, it would be already grandma. Early ages. Like now, look, the men at 45, they're still playing computer games, like they still think they're kids.
It's called delayed adolescence.
Precisely. But
Prolonged
prolonged
adolescence.
adolescence. But like we actually, like all our society, look, I lived only in Russia and I lived in Australia. I can only judge from my perspective, but this is what I think, that we are so prolonging all this time, and then we just
Well, we're living longer, so you can sort of afford to extend something that was how can you put it? Something that was related to something when you were much younger in earlier times is now associated with being older because we're living longer. So.
Exactly, like we're getting married at 35, we're having children really late, like at 35, 40, like the...
Well, it's like us.
Yes, because it's just, if you look at it,
we
yes.
were married 17 years before we had Aelita, so
but we never even
we were
thought.
much older parents, which is maybe because we're older parents too. We had a completely different attitude towards life, really, and
Because
children, and Aelita, and her creativity, and everything.
We always treated Aelita as equal and as friend. And like I remember, I was talking to one of my friends at work, and I said, "This is how I treat Aelita," and he was so upset. And he was just really start yelling and saying, what? No, no, you have to really know the rules. They have to know the rules. They have to know the boundaries. You don't treat kids like this. And I looked at him. I thought to myself, but look, we do actually, we do treat Aelita more like a friend and like a mini adult rather than a kid. And this is, I told you, this is, you have to do that. Because, every time I would try to establish the boundaries, I would explain Aelita why. Like, even if she wouldn't understand or if she wouldn't sort of agree with me, I would still explain to her why I'm doing it this way. Why it's always why. I always explained. I try to explain everything to her. If she would understand, she would obey. She wouldn't obey, at least she knows why I'm establishing these boundaries.
I think it's incumbent on adults to actually, without going overboard, provide an explanation to kids. Be serious to them, but explain to them. Don't just be a blind, mindless, authoritative figure just because you're older, just because you're the parent. Don't do that. Go to the trouble to get down to their height and explain to them exactly why you're doing what you're doing.
I think it is very important.
I think, and we did that with Aelita. We really made a point of explaining it to her, and so that to her, she actually understood the reason behind it. We weren't just blindly imposing some sort of authoritarian point of view on her. And that sort of gets back to what you said in the last podcast about this way of developing critical thinking, because simply by doing that, you're already making somebody think critically because they're forced to, because they're basically listening to an explanation which they have to process. If you have to process an explanation, then you're already involved in thinking critically about what another person is saying. And so that's how you foster that.
But also, it's really interesting from my school, my memories, certain things I learned, I can't actually take it out of my head, even though I know it's a wrong knowledge.
Like what?
Because you see, like, science constantly progressing, like our attitude,
That's
our
not the fault of
understanding.
education.
No. But you see, like, if I would have been, if I was critical to all the knowledge being provided by my school, I already would have had this, like, foundation of it, like, well, it will change. Well, I have to question it, and I have to educate myself through whole years to come. Because
there's a use-by date on a lot of what you learn.
Use-by date on everything, pretty much.
And the school should tell you that. So it's better if they taught you critical thinking, because then you would leave school and add to your knowledge and modify it. Yeah, right.
Or maybe just like, completely started learning something else. Because look, very basically, it will take you 1 year to accomplish something or study in a totally different direction.
And it's interesting you say that, because they've actually discovered that a lot of American, and I'm sure it's the same here in Australia, a lot of the American textbooks are actually quite political in the way that a lot of the information is presented. So, in other words, I mean, I realise that really no information is neutral. I understand that, but there's actually a bit of an agenda going on behind the scenes in textbooks. But of course, number one, kids are not aware of it. The teachers don't really have a choice. I mean, there are so many incredible and fantastic teachers out there, but their hands are tied by the education system, by the system itself, which is just this machine. And then on the other hand, of course, the parents haven't got the time or inclination probably to really dissect a textbook and say, hang on a second, this is actually not factually correct. This is presenting a very specific agenda, a very specific point of view. And then, even if you were to challenge that, you would be met with so much resistance from the school, from teachers. So you would be sort of on your own, and and your kid would be in the middle of all this. They'd be thinking, well, on the one hand, I'm getting all this information from school, and my parents are saying something else, and there's a contradiction here. You know what I mean? There isn't this. You're not sort of really fostering an environment of discussion, saying, okay, well, that's. I mean, if I was a teacher, I would say, well, that's really interesting. Let's have a look at that information in the textbook. Well, gee, it turns out you are actually right and the textbook is wrong. How interesting. Or, there are actually multiple points of view to this information, which is presented in a very black and white way, but it's actually very grey. There are much more subtle points of view here. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's discuss that in class. And then it becomes a totally dynamic process, firstly. Secondly, imagine how your child or, whichever sort of kid has brought that up, imagine how empowered it would make them feel. Imagine how confident it would make them feel. They think, wow, I've actually challenged this adult system. I've challenged a textbook, and all the adults are treating me very seriously. Can you imagine can you imagine the domino effect? The domino effect it's going to have on a child or anybody if they're treated in that way.
But you see, this child like this is very difficult to talk to. For example, like with Aelita, because she is constantly critically thinking about everything like adult expresses. It is on one side, it is difficult. This is why
I don't find it difficult.
1 second, in school, it usually, because if teacher has 30 kids, like in our case, it was 33 kids in our class.
Same with us.
Then of course for teacher is like, well, here we go. This is a food for you, knowledge. You just digest it and bring it back to me. That's the same recipe back. But you see, this is the easiest way to teach the child, because for the teacher to do the critical thinking, it's so difficult, because it's not enough time. Too many students in the class.
The formal classroom structure is completely antithetical to any sort of interesting, in-depth, critical analysis or any multiple divergent points of view. I mean, it's totally resistant to that, because it's all about everybody has to be at the same level, everybody has to progress at the same rate, even though that's insane, because every single individual person is completely different in the way they absorb knowledge, in the knowledge that interests them. I mean, most kids probably couldn't give a damn about whatever they're learning and hate it anyway. Just ask them, what do you want to learn about? And probably has nothing to do with whatever's being rammed down their throat.
But it is so important, for example, that
because we're doing it one-on-one with Aelita.
Yes, because you see, it's so important, because it's not just the hypothetical knowledge I always had a question, why I need this for? Will I use it in my real life?
Oh, you're a bad student. You're not a good student, and definitely not a good Soviet student if you question the system. You just obey, okay? Bad student. Give her a low score, and just keep an eye on her as well, and her parents, and
Well, but it's just critical thinking. I think it's just so much important. And you have to develop in your child, constantly question everything. Why it's written? Is it correct? Because you see, I always thought the book is authority. If student book, like a school book, this is authority.
But
I have to know that.
Can I just say something about that? And it's really interesting. It's absolutely right. The book is this unquestioned authority. I probably wouldn't have a problem with that if, for math, when we started learning math when we were kids, the very first book that we were introduced was the Principia. And for the teachers to say, this is the mathematics Bible, this is like a sacred document of math. Imagine how differently you would look at math. Because, okay, religion has its sacred documents. It has the Quran, it has the Bible, and the Bhagavad Vishnu, whatever it is, the Indian, I'm sure I got the pronunciation wrong. But let's do it with the sciences. Let's have the Bible of geography, the sacred text of geography. Let's have the sacred text. And they're all out there. But they're never presented in school. Let me see this, Newton, in Newton's own handwriting, in his own diagrams. Let me see it from the man himself. That's going to give you a completely different... And the teacher might say, look, kids, I get that you're not going to understand anything in this thing. Well, maybe some of you will, who knows? But I want you to be aware of just how much heart and soul and effort went into a document on math, on something that's rewritten, by other people and presented in the classroom. Let's go back to the original document.
We're still using this document. Number one, number two.
Bill Gates bought the actual original manuscript, which is really interesting.
Principia.
Yeah, of the Mathematica Principia by Newton. So it goes to show you. So Bill Gates has the original sacred text of math. Now, there you go.
It's absolutely incredible,
Yeah.
and I think it is very important. And
I'm
maybe
sure
tying
you and
everything
I
up, like,
would've
because you see, like
had a different attitude.
it's always for me was math. Okay, history, it's all separate. Geography, it's all separate, but it's all interweaved together. How can you separate it all? Because like certain history influenced mathematical discoveries, a certain advance like in civilization, or for example, the influenced everything is like, it's like a big sort of
look at theoretical physics. I mean, look at the amazing discoveries that we're making in theoretical physics almost every couple of months, every year, and theories are being overturned, like some theories that were held to be foundations of physics are actually being challenged. You know what I mean? So it gets back to what you said. You must teach kids to have an open mind, and say, look,
because you
kids,
have
this
to
is
just
all
at least mention it. Look, everything you learn today, it may be overturned tomorrow. This is why you use your brain, you use your critical thinking, you use everything just possible to.
This is what we have so
right
far.
now. Yes, you
so
really have to
far.
know the
Tomorrow,
knowledge now.
Tomorrow will be different, and the next day, and the next year.
You have to know that
Absolutely.
I think the most important aspect of just the teaching aspect is know how to absorb the knowledge, know how to discover the knowledge, know how to juggle all different opinions and then form your own opinion, because everything else you'll be able to get from all different from internet, from books, from teachers. You can get all different variety of knowledge, and it's just like,
look, the day before the periodic table, the Russian guy, the chemical Mendeleev, thank you. There was a day before Mendeleev got up in the morning and had his revelation, because he'd been sleeping on it, I think, or maybe it's probably an anecdote.
He dreamed about everything, and he got up and he said, "Yes, I know."
It's just his mind. He's the whole night. His brain was working on it, right? And he got up in the morning.
Years and years. Was working on it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course. The guy spent his life working on that. I get that. But there was that eureka moment for him when he got up one day, whenever it was, he got up, and everything fell into place. For what we today in the West, it should be called the Mendeleev table, but anyway, we call it the periodic table of all the atomic elements. The other thing, but there was a day before that when nobody.
Russia, tablica Mendeleeva.
Right, we don't call it that, you see, because because he's Russian, we get rid of his name and just call it the periodic table. So anyway, make sure it's anonymous. There's two people you do that to women and Russians. You make sure that you just don't have a name there, just some other term that you know about. Anyway, but the thing is, there was a day
and children as well.
Yeah, okay, let's just not get too political here. But there was a time before that, and it's exactly like there was a day before Einstein's. The energy mass times light squared. I mean, there was a day before that. I mean, the thing is, when there's an anecdote where there's when Einstein thought of that, he went around for several days afterwards in a euphoric state, because he'd realized that he'd come up with something so essential to understanding matter, to understanding the relationship between mass and energy and light, and he put those together and thought, oh wow, it's just a simple formula. You know what I mean? But there was a day before that. So there could be the following day when there will be a theory for, a relatively simple theory. It's about a paragraph for electromagnetism. I think Maxwell or whatever. I can't remember the guy who did it. But, or the periodic table or whatever. We will have all these milestones going forward in the future. So kids have to be aware of that. Is say, look, kids, it's this long, long, ongoing process. And everything you understand may be overturned, or it might be added to, it might be expanded or whatever. But yeah, so you give them more of this critical base of just understanding the way knowledge is expanded and discovered. So it's much more exciting, dynamic process.
Dynamic process.
Yeah. And it's something which, it's an ongoing process. So there you go.
And of course, you have to make sure that all this knowledge kids are learning, it's all something to do with the real life as well. Because, questions are always asked, or why I need it for, because I don't need it in real life. Because you see, you have to really make sure that.
But the reason for that today, essentially, goes back to the reason why we have the whole structure that we have today of formal education, which is related to the Industrial Revolution. To be honest, for a brilliant analysis of all that, go to a guy I mentioned in another podcast called Boy in a Band. He actually talks about that in so much detail so well. This podcast is more meant to be about Aelita and creativity and art. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking about so many other things as well, like parenting and science, and because everything is interrelated. The interesting thing is because of Aelita, and we are so sensitive. I think you and I are so sensitive about the relationship between adults and kids, and this whole authoritarian ageism thing that you were talking about. Because of that, I'm so super critical about every interaction I see between adults and kids, and I'm always critical of the way the parent is relating to the kid. They're always trying to put them in place and trying to sort of make sure that they, they're not too loud or they don't touch something, or it's always a relationship like this, like don't do this, don't touch that, just wait your turn, all this kind of all this. And it's not malicious. Parents are not being malicious. They just think that's the way you treat kids. But I really look at it the other way around. To me, I think all those tiny moments added together are going to shape
the person who they are.
A person negatively. They're going. And it's going to. I would challenge somebody to say that it's not going to form a counterproductive relationship between them and their parents, in ways they couldn't even imagine. It's just going to create this divide. You're just dividing people very slowly over long periods of time, and that's what I was so wary of. I'm thinking, why? And because. Before we had Aelita, this was all theoretical, of course. I'm looking at parents and thinking, gee, why are they behaving like that? That seems to be so counterproductive and destructive. But because of Aelita now, I'm absolutely now seeing the way it's just damaging the relationship. It's just not a positive way to treat kids, and we've self-consciously, right from the start, as you said before, we've tried to really have a different attitude to Aelita in bringing her up. This is not just to do with her art, but I think her art has really played a huge part in the way that we've treated Aelita, because we wanted her to be fully independent, expressive, and imaginative in her art. That automatically crosses over into her life, because art and life are the same thing. I mean, it's really two sides of the same coin, so you can't possibly sort of separate it. Especially not when it comes to abstraction. And it's interesting. I actually want to do a whole podcast on specifically on the avant-garde, on the experimental, on the abstract, because I think it is its own unique category in the arts, whether it's music, and I want to talk about I want to talk about experimental music and the effect that it's had on conventional music. I actually want to talk about actually no, yeah. So so getting back to that. So because I think Aelita is one of the only kids who's an abstract artist. Are any of these other kids abstract artists? Not really. They're all figurative. All these other kids are figurative. Nobody.
Most of them figurative.
They're all figurative. So the difference is Aelita
But you see,
is
Aelita
abstract.
is known like her major body of work is like she said, puzzle into her own universe.
Yeah,
She
that's Aelita's.
built
Yeah,
in
I
her
know.
own
That's
universe
Aelita's
through the
take on it.
abstraction.
I get it. That's Aelita's imaginative take on it. That all of her paintings are puzzle pieces. That when you interconnect them all, it forms her universe, which is, I think, an amazing. It's an amazing way for an artist to talk about their works, because I've never heard a painter talk about all of their paintings as one piece of an entire puzzle. You talk about a body of
but
work,
it's really
but not
interesting
puzzle
because
pieces.
this is why she does not like to sell her work, and it just
No, I get
it's
that.
quite rare to
Of course.
purchase her work that she is actually allowed to.
Well, the
sell
pieces are
certain
located.
pieces.
Some of the pieces of the puzzle are located in
all
around
over
the
the
world in other people's homes and in other families. But the pieces are there, But yeah, I get all that. No, I get all that. The way and the way she imaginatively refers to her artwork is an outcome of, I think, her being an abstract artist. She just has a much freer way, because abstraction is all about complete freedom. We really felt on our own, completely on our own, because we had a child who painted abstract. Now, most people probably wouldn't really sympathise much with abstraction. They're probably really ambivalent about it. They don't even know what to think about it. I mean, you look at a lot of people's comments on YouTube, and they just say, "Oh, it's just splashing paint around. It's just throwing paint. It's meaningless." And all this sort of commentary related to the lack of meaning or the lack of skill, all these sort of terms that people use, and they're quite, look, you're free to use any terms you like. I mean, in it doesn't matter, because all art is all opinion anyway. So I get all that. But the interesting thing is that because specifically abstract art has no real set of values that you can judge it against, you're really kind of on your own. And so because we had a child, she's just a little kid, basically, creating all these abstract works. And so we were totally on our own, because mostly really parents only take an interest in whatever their kids are doing if it's a recognizable, if they're drawing or painting something that's recognizable. As soon as it becomes recognizable, the parents will look at it and say, "Oh, wow, lovely. I can see, there's a stick figure of there's a stick figure there," and they'll say, "Oh, who's that? Who's that? Is that you? Is it me? Is it mummy or whatever?" And as soon as you do that, the second you do that, you're giving them your stamp of approval as a parent. And this is a major milestone for a child. To you, it's a throwaway comment, because you recognize this stick figure as having a basic human form. You compliment the child on it, because for the first time you've got this quote unquote resemblance to reality. I don't really think so, but anyway, it's in the mind of the parent. It looks like something that I can relate to. It looks like something recognizable. So, and then the child will say, "Oh, well, it's you, mummy," or then they'll paint sort of. Then they'll draw the family. They'll draw themselves and stick figures. Themselves and mum and dad, and they'll say, "Look, it's us. It's a representation of our family." And then there's the house, and then there'll be the circle with all the protruding lines being the sun. And on the one hand, you can say, "Oh, look, come on, it's totally innocuous. It's innocent, totally innocent." I mean, here is a kid just simply, going down the path of accurate representation. There's nothing wrong with it. And yeah, in principle, there is nothing wrong with it, definitely. But on the other hand, I think you are actually narrowing. You've suddenly put in roadblocks for expression. You're limiting the way already the creative mind is expressing itself. You're editing out so many possibilities, because now you have basically innocuously, completely benignly, you've set the child on a particular road. Or, for example, music is another one. I mean, when people talk about learning an instrument, all they're talking about basically is being able to play a classical composer with some degree of competence. And that's what they're talking about. Which is to me, it's the most ridiculous, insane, and narrow understanding of music that you could possibly realize. And it actually took me years to realize this. Anyway, and it probably only because of my dad's sort of extensive record collection that I had examples of music that most people would find a lot of trouble relating to, because it's very discordant, it's very arrhythmical, and it's very atonal. So anything that's not immediately rhythmical or tonal or follows some scale or whatever, people they're lost. Their bearings are completely lost, and they're going, I don't know. They can't trust their own judgments. They don't know what to think about it, and so they dismiss it. As soon as you don't understand something, you dismiss it. And especially if it's too difficult to teach, you just cut it out of the curriculum. You don't even and this is the real danger. The real danger is that you don't expose kids to it, and that's the most critical thing you can do. Is that you put aside all of your prejudices, you put aside all of those conservative ways of thinking, and even if it goes against what you think.
Sorry,
what you think privately or personally, you expose them to it anyway. Just show them, play whether it's music, you play it, or whether it's art or whatever, or art materials. You let them express themselves in ways that you may have absolutely no concept of, let alone even have an understanding of. Do nothing. Just stand back and do nothing and let them do it, because in that expressive moment, you have no idea how much is happening mentally, physically. You have no idea, and I wouldn't even call it learning. I mean, you can call it accelerated learning. I wouldn't even call it that. I would call it just accelerated development of all the senses and interaction between the senses. You're firing so many neurons, you're firing up the brain in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine. So create the circumstances to allow that to happen. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. I think Aelita's making us cups of tea or something. So we'll leave it at that. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting and inspirational. And please join us for the next podcast. Thank you.